This is Out Loud and Laughing.
All right. We are super excited for our guest today on Out Loud and Laughing. He is a storyteller who understands that representation is more than just being seen. It's about being understood. While many first met Zeke as a fierce competitor on Survivor, he's also used his platform to become formidable architect of cultural change, which we're super excited to deep dive into that. So today, Zeke is a writer, a comedian, a powerful voice on the GLAAD board of directors, with a ton of work behind the scenes to reshape the LGBTQIA messaging in our media, which is so important. Someone who is always knows exactly what it's like to have their story told by others, and has dedicated a career to ensuring the next generation gets to tell their own. So Zeke, welcome to the show. We're super excited.
Welcome,
Thank you so
Zeke.
much. That is the nicest intro anyone has ever given me. That's
You
I
deserve it.
I'm overwhelmed. I'm gonna steal that.
Copy paste. Zeke, we're so thrilled to have you on today. Thank you for taking the time out of your super busy schedule. We have so much to get into with you. Is it okay if we jump right in?
Yeah, let's do it.
Awesome. So you've spent a lot of time in front of the camera. Let's be real. So, but now it's changed a little bit, right? You're sitting in the room where those decisions are made. And at GLAAD, if you could share with our with our followers what GLAAD is and what they do, because you're sitting in the writers' rooms there, and we're really interested there. I have a second part to that question, but can you tell us a little bit about GLAAD first?
I would love to.
Thanks.
So GLAAD is an LGBTQ plus media organization. We were founded in the early 80s in the midst of the AIDS crisis. And in response to the New York Times writing really shameful, kind of scientifically inaccurate things about those of us who were dying, those in our community who were dying of AIDS. And it initially was just sort of like, hey, this is not a gay related immunodeficiency disease. It's a virus, and you can acquire AIDS and all of that stuff. And here we are 40 years later, still trying to get the New York Times to write scientifically accurate things about trans people. Um, but we're not just, media watchdogs. We collaborate with studios and writers and producers to create accurate LGBTQ representation. Because our belief is that if we can have a heated rivalry, such a great
Yeah.
example.
Yeah.
Yeah. If we can have these shows that transcend just the community and they get to people, they get to hockey fans, then we can move them towards acceptance and tolerance and not voting against us, right? That we will move them not only politically, but also in their communities as well. So our signature event is the GLAAD Media Awards. It's an award show, but it's also a fundraiser, where we honor the best of LGBTQ representation across media. But we do so much. We work with local activists to help more accurate, tell their stories, and we give them media training so that they, know how to navigate how to navigate the world of being on camera or being interviewed, because not everybody is at their heart someone who's comfortable in front of the camera. I wish I was being a little more articulate right now, but we anyway, we do so much great work with communities of faith and people of color, and I think we're really at the forefront of the movement as far as thought leadership and messaging goes. And I just can't say enough about how much I love GLAAD.
It's so important for our community. I'm gonna date myself, but when I moved to New York City in 2007, I remember volunteering for the GLAAD Media Awards. And I think I was like a runner, and I was like helping with all the stuff, and like it's such a huge spectacle, and it's actually amazing, like the talent that comes in, not even just gay people. And I remember sharing an elevator with Barbara Walters back then. So this was at the Grand Marquis, and so you bring up some memories for me when you mentioned the GLAAD Awards.
Yeah, I mean, we've had Beyonce, we've had Oprah, we've had Britney Spears.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's so many people who are interested in this story, this human story of how we show up authentically ourselves. And it's so important to have organizations like GLAAD make sure that that's being transcended into the media. I'm curious to know what the exact moment was for you. When did you realize that telling the story was more powerful than sort of being the story, right? Because we all know that, we don't want to harp, but you
Well, sure.
have
Well, we
had,
should do a little
yeah,
background for those
yeah,
who
yeah. Do a
people
little
who
background, and
um
I'll let you guide that.
so 10 years ago, I went on Survivor, and at the time I didn't tell people that I was trans. It I had a really hard time transitioning, and then I just got to move to New York and do comedy and just be Zeke the dude. But I loved Survivor, and I wanted to stop letting that me being trans be the thing that held me back. And I asked myself, what's the one thing you would do if you weren't afraid of if you weren't afraid? And it was I would go on Survivor. And so I did, and I did one season, and that I was trans did not come up. It wasn't an issue. And then I did a second season right back to back. So fall and then spring. About halfway through that season, a contestant really maliciously outed me as trans. And so I go on, I play a little more, I get voted off, and immediately I know that this is going to be a huge moment. Because I wasn't because I yeah, sorry. Because I wasn't trans and then I was. And I always felt like that was a good opportunity for people to see beyond the label of transgender. Be like, oh, it's just Zeke the goofy guy. It's just Zeke the dude. And then later you find out that I'm trans. And I think that that's where we can move the needle.
Yeah,
Right. Uh, so I think it was really after that episode aired, and
yeah.
I started talking to people in all over the country, and it made a difference. They didn't. I was so afraid that people were going to know that I was trans and they would hate me, and they didn't. They were just like, "Oh, but you're just the guy that we've been watching throughout the past season and a half."
Yeah.
And that's okay, right? John
And
and I talk about it a lot on the pod that, in our community, it's our story to tell, right? Like our individual stories. So what you had to go through was extremely brave, especially because if you think about it, like I'm putting myself in your shoes a little bit from like a show standpoint. This happens. It happens months before it even gets aired. So it's happened.
yeah,
You're
I
on an
had 9 months
island.
where
You're
I worked with GLAAD about how to,
Yeah.
just talk about being trans because I hadn't talked about it in years. I didn't know how to.
Yeah. Um, it feels like we are living in a time that does feel very heavy for our community, especially the trans community. Like, and we're all trying to rally around, but this world is just really shit at the moment.
Yeah.
And so like that's why organizations like GLAAD are really helping. And so we know, again, you're a leader on the GLAAD board, but how do you protect your own spirit that you can continue to advocate for the other spirits, right? How do you continue to think about how do I protect Zeke first? Because I always tell myself, put your mask on first, like you do on an airplane if you have to. Like, how do you do that?
I limit the amount of news that I consume.
Mm,
I am only the only social media I have is Instagram, and I am not on that a ton, and that's how I have to do it. Is I have to have very firm barriers about how much I engage, and there will be friends who will come over and they want to talk about it and they're upset, and I'll just say, no, we can't. We can't talk about this. If you want to talk about it, I'll go to the other room. But I think I can't be immersed in it 24/7. And then, you know, I think being part of GLAAD also helps because I feel like I am doing the work, right? I am contributing what I can contribute. Um, you know, Parents and kids still reach out to me, and I email them back and provide them with resources. So, and I think that's what anyone can do, right? Like, I think even cisgender, people who are allies, they can really kind of gently try to inform and persuade the people who are not hip with trans people or who have questions about trans kids in sports or the trans medical care for young people. And I think that's what you can do, is like it's a really like one to one, individual to individual kind of campaign that we need to lead right now. Because if you look at back how successful we were with marriage equality, a lot of that was just like, I'm going to come out to my neighbor and my neighbor will know me. And that is going to change their idea of who a gay person is. Um, Trans people, we have fewer numbers. So we need to engage our cisgender LGB uh, allies to kind of be part of this person to person dialogue and conversation.
When I was learning more about you, Zeke, I came across something where you were basically talking about stepping out and being this like you're advocating for people who identify in our community to be writers, to be comedians, to be in the forefront of the camera. um it's so important, and especially, to back up behind this question. And I'm also curious though, being in front of the camera, glad having its impact on, the perception of how we are, or how we are perceived in the media. Does this like boil over or bubble over into social? Like, does GLAAD have any sort of impact on bigger narratives that are going on outside of just media as I think we understand it to be, like TV, television, film? Like, is this sort of proliferating out further than that, or is that even a silly question?
I mean, yes, I think we are trying to identify where are young people, or where are people getting their media from, right? Because it's not the nightly news, it's not the sitcoms on the mainstream media, which we have very good relationships with the mainstream media and with writers rooms for those shows. But now it's like it's TikTok, it's wherever else. I'm so bad at the social part. um but we have a really fantastic research department that goes and is looking at where are the people who we consider movable, who are on the fence largely about trans stuff right now, um, but could be swayed, right? They're not hardcore J.K. Rowling, but they have questions. So we're trying to figure out who those people are and what is the best way to get the message to them, right?
That makes sense.
Yeah.
And I think it's super important, especially there's so many people that don't understand our community as a whole, but especially the T in our community, right? And I feel like a lot of people have a lot of questions. What are some like things that the media might be portraying that is just not factual, right? That people are soaking up as truth, but I feel like GLAAD and other organizations are trying to do their best to debunk these things. And like for our listeners that may or may not understand, well, what can we tell them?
Yeah, I mean, there is such an overblown emphasis on detransitioners. So people who start to socially or medically transition and then decide that it's not for them. Um, like 98, I believe 98 or more percent of people who engage in trans related or gender related healthcare are much happier and do not detransition. But there is, I don't know. I would be curious to know from someone who studies this why there are liberal people or sort of like moderate people who just become so obsessed with trans people. Like it's this, I the right, I understand. You feel like you lost the gay marriage thing, the trans thing. You can, work up your congregations, right? But there just seems to be people who just want to look away from all of the evidence that trans-related healthcare has been, you know, uh, there have been these protocols have existed for decades. They are approved by the American Medical Association, American Psychological Association, the American Pediatric Association, all of the major professional, doctors organizations, and they're just trying to find these little cracks. Um, and I don't know why. I don't know why trans people are just have stuck in the craw of a certain liberal and moderate people.
It's true.
But it
It's so
is. It's
true.
like a fascination, and people like go fully down rabbit holes and become conservative just on trans stuff.
So along with the transition in the medical care that is being sort of ripped out of every out of everyone, but specifically speaking towards the trans community, but what besides that, what are the other gaps that you think the media misses when telling the trans experience story?
Sure. Several years ago, I had the honor of being part of a documentary. You can watch it on Netflix. It's called Disclosure: Trans Lives on Screen, and it traces the history of trans representation. And one of the things that uh, we see from the very beginning of cinema is trans people as monsters, and trans people as killers, and trans people as being trans for reasons not that this is innately who they are. Being trans to get an advantage, to get into women's spaces. And those are the concerns that people have, is like, especially with sports right now, is, well, you know, these biological male athletes, they aren't trying to um, you know, authentically be themselves. They're trying to get in women's locker rooms. They're trying to get an unfair competitive advantage. And that's what we see in the media, right? If you think about even stuff that's probably like Tootsie, um, if you're familiar,
Of course.
Dustin Hoffman dresses as a woman in order to get soap opera parts, or Mrs.
This is
Doubtfire,
Doubtfire.
Mrs.
right?
Yeah,
Doubtfire, yeah.
another great
You,
one. Yeah, you're right.
right, and on the surface, you're like, oh well, they're just harmless little comedies. But what sort of they've implanted in our brains is that people, trans people, become a different gender in order to gain some sort of advantage or entrance.
That's so interesting, and it's such a duh response, right, when you think about it, and especially as we see it, but, like, it just didn't come to mind because it's not something that I focus on every day,
Right. And the
so
other challenge too is when cisgender people play trans characters.
mhm.
And I think
Yeah.
of like Eddie Redmayne in the Danish Girl, and people are like, "Oh, but it was great. It was a great representation of trans people." And I'm like, "Well, it's not when he gets up there in his tuxedo and accepts a Best Actor award for playing a woman." You know, that's the trouble.
Yeah.
Is people think like, "Oh, he played such a wonderful girl, but he's really a boy." Um, and that also like leads to the dualism of, well, you're not really who you say you are. You're always really this thing.
And so
You
then
also
before
oh, go
go
ahead.
ahead, Brian. Oh, I was just wondering before we move on because 'cause I'm just so curious, and I am sorry to interrupt you, but, uh, so, as somebody who sits on the board of GLAAD and somebody who is on the forefront and in the sausage factory, making sort of, like, decisions on how this stuff is made and what decisions are made, where do you see Zeke making big impacts today? Like, I know that, like, with the work that you're doing, like talk walk me through sort of like the feeling that it gives and how that like manifests for you.
Well, for me, first and foremost, my advocacy is about living life to the fullest, um, and being an example to trans youth and any trans person or any queer person of this like wonderful life that I live. I am deeply in love with my husband, and we had a wonderful wedding a couple years ago that was in the New York Times, that was in People magazine, and
Hmm. I remember.
we have I I don't let being trans hold me back, right? I try to live the life that is fearless. And I think modeling that to other people, being a possibility model, I think that's the first thing I do. Um, right. That's sort of the first step that leads my advocacy. The second is the question of what would have little Zeke needed to see on
Mm.
television, uh, in order to not have such a hard time when I transitioned. So that comes with writing scripts, pitching shows, um, and even more broadly, not just trans stuff, but queer stuff. My husband is an actor, and I am able to sort of participate in his career and write things for him and see him, also his career blossom, which, he is a Filipino immigrant, queer guy, and his story is very important to be heard as well.
Yeah, I think you segue nicely into what I wanted to ask next because I do believe like you and Nico, your husband, have been such a symbol of queer joy. I think it's been so inspiring. I remember the article with your wedding and you guys are so visible with your relationship and I love that. In a world that often sees trans stories through the lens of trauma, like how do you intentionally hold spaces for you and your husband to be silly and be love and even be a little bougie?
That's just who we are. We're just a
Yeah.
couple goofballs, we're just a couple of
And that's
comedians. We're
it.
silly dudes. We run around our house trying to pants each other. I think we're just, with each other, we can truly be ourselves without fear of judgment. And we're just goofballs all the time. And when you get so used to being a goofball around someone, that sort of bleeds into the rest of your life. Um, and I think I was Nico's first boyfriend, first relationship,
Yep.
and he had a lot of feelings of about not feeling attractive or not feeling wanted. And so I just, from the get go, I was like, whenever he wants a kiss, he's gonna get a kiss. Whenever he wants to hold hands in public, we will. And so we are very um, PDA forward.
Love it.
Love.
But it's all part of, like, I never want him to think I am not so proud of him, so proud to be his husband, and so absolutely in love with him.
Mm, I love that. That's beautiful.
Well said.
Yeah. I'm gonna go back and reread this article. I remember seeing it on the Instagrams, but I didn't read the full article, I'm gonna be honest. Um, but
Yeah,
I
and
have
what's cool is, so that we had dual exclusives. We had the New York Times, which did a great job, and in the midst of them writing all this shit about trans people,
Mm.
you know, they wrote this great article about our wedding, which I think mentioned that I was trans only in, like, he was on Survivor and was outed as trans.
sure.
And then the People article, that I am trans is not mentioned,
Hmm.
Good.
which I think is pretty cool.
I think it's the
It's
right thing.
It's the right thing. I just recently watched a clip. I think it was of an Oprah Winfrey show back in the day, and
Mm.
some I'm gonna say uneducated white woman, but today they come off as entitled and privileged. But she was like, I don't have to tell you that I'm straight. Why do I have to? Oh, it was when Ellen came out. It was the episode that Oprah had Ellen on her show, and there is this push and pull like that. I feel like, okay, well, is it important that I tell people that I'm gay or is it not? And I think, we're selective where we share those news because we always talk about here that coming out is not a one-time thing in your life. It like happens almost every single day as if it's a revolving door. But just to hear your take on like the New York Times versus the People take of the story, I think is really interesting.
Right. And
Really
I think
interesting.
I say that from a media perspective of it, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, if a trans person did anything that was in the newspaper, that they were trans was the most interesting thing about them. There was no way that a trans person could do anything without their being trans being the centerpiece. Um, so when I say that it's great about those articles that that I am trans is not the centerpiece, is not like, you know, Crazy Rich Asians comedian marries trans guy. I that is good. I think that
Very,
indicates some progress.
yeah.
Okay.
And it's not that we don't want to. It is complicated, right? Because there are some times that we do want to live fully in our queerness, and there are other times where, you know, I don't need to tell people I'm trans.
Right. 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 Completely.
My
Completely.
my mom lives in Texas, and you know, there are times where it's like, yeah, nope, we don't, nobody needs to know.
Well, I just have to say, just thank you first and foremost for being vulnerable and honest about your story. I know that the bravery it takes to come talk to strangers about something that is so personal and uniquely yours, it's just very appreciated. And there's always people out there listening that I'm sure that this resonates with, time, especially in this timely place that we're at. But while I am continue to be impressed by everything it is that you're doing, we have to get down to some really important work here.
Yeah, let's do it.
We like to play something we call this or that, and we play with every guest. And so I'm going to kick it off. It's super simple. You can ask questions if you want, clarifying, but it's really just a way for us to get to know you outside of the great work that you're doing. You ready?
Let's do it. I'm
All
excited.
right. Okay, cool. So this is sort of kicking off like analog or new age. So are you more of like a pen and paper guy or laptop and a
Very
coffee
much pen and
shop?
paper guy.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Didn't even let the technology riff off the back
Nope.
end. I love that. He knows exactly what he wants.
I love that. Okay. Are you hosting a party or are you the last to leave someone else's party?
Oh, I'm hosting the party. I love to host.
Okay.
In college, I guess in high school, I didn't really have friends. And in college, I was in social groups and I didn't know what to do with myself. I had a lot of social anxiety. So I realized if you were the host, right? If you were pouring the drinks or putting out the food or taking the trash, if you had something to do that mitigated the anxiety a lot. So when I was in my 20s in New York, I just hosted the parties. I called it dog with a job, because I could talk to people. And then when I got too anxious, I could be like, oh, I got to go do whatever. It also is a good way to get you out of conversations with people you don't want to talk to. But still today, like when we bought we bought a house where we could host. And Nico, he doesn't like to go out. My husband, Nico, he doesn't like to go out. So we have everyone come here and we have a great time.
Easier.
I love to host. I added this one. I'm going to be honest. I added this one mid conversation because of you and Nico's little game and being silly about pantsing yourselves. So I had to ask, pants or no pants?
Oh, no pants.
It's just
I
better.
agree.
Yeah.
I'm not wearing pants right now. You can't see them. I'm just kidding.
I am. It's a little chilly in our house, so I need to put
Yeah, exactly.
put
It's
things
chilly.
on.
Okay, Zeke, this one is Traders or Survivor?
Traders.
Ugh.
I know we were talking about it before we hopped on. It's a good
Well,
one.
yeah, I think it's such a great reality show because it takes people from the different reality genres and is like, let's see how you interact together. It's sort of like the third wave of reality TV. And Survivor, I'm gonna watch 50, but I have a complicated relationship with it. I haven't really watched any, um, but I'm gonna watch 50 because I have a handful of friends on it. But yeah, Traders is just so much fun. It's so silly. I've been in love with Alan Cumming since I was 12 years old and
I
saw
was
him as
just
the
gonna say.
MC in Cabaret.
Yep.
And yeah,
Huge Alan Cummings fan. You took the words right out of my mouth. Completely agree.
yeah.
So I don't know. Now I'm kind of twisted on this one. So would you rather be watching a reality show or a scripted show?
Scripted show.
Ooh, what's that?
Well, I love to analyze how a writer came up with the story.
Mm.
I think there are twists and turns and things that can happen in a scripted show that just can't in unscripted, right? Because you're dealing with real people, so you can't kill them off or have them be in a car chase, or that we can't reveal that whatever their mom was a serial killer, and they're just all of these fun things that we can do in scripted television that you can't do with real people.
Makes sense.
Yeah, it's totally fair. Okay, the last one's a little tough because the first part of it you'll probably want to answer quickly, but then we put a little spin on it. So, a quiet night with Nico at home or a night out at a Broadway premiere?
I mean, Broadway premiere.
Yeah.
I'm a Broadway boy
Yeah,
through and
we are
through.
too.
That was my original. The thing that the first thing that I connected with was musical theater, and I still love it to this day. So if you got Broadway premiere tickets, then we're putting pants on and we're going out.
You
Touche.
gotta go.
And you gotta wear pants.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Zeke, we appreciate the conversation. We learned a lot. We laughed. We just really enjoyed having you on. This is an open invitation to come back. We appreciate everything you're doing for our community, for just all the letters, and thank you so much for taking the time to have the conversation with us.
Yeah, and thanks for having me. And I think that there is just so much more we can do to educate the community about trans stuff. And maybe I can come back and we can sort of go over like what are the questions people have but are afraid
Yes.
to ask.
Mm.
And equip your listeners to become better advocates for the T in the community.
And allies, of course.
Yeah.
All right. Well, consider yourself booked. Thanks, Zeke, so
Yeah.
much. We appreciate it.
Thank you guys.
Take care. Bye-bye.
This was Out Loud and Laughing.
We're available everywhere you get your podcasts: Spotify, Apple, YouTube, iHeart, or wherever.